Welcome to About the Winelands. In this show, we will be chatting to leaders, influencers, wine producers, restaurants, and other role players. Tune in every week for our latest episode. You will find us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram TV, Spotify, Apple Podcast, and Google Podcast. Welcome to About the Winelands. Today I'm talking to Martin Cahnbley from Planet Wine, all the way from Auckland in New Zealand. Hi Martin, how are you?
Really well, thank you, and great to be able to speak to everybody in SA and around the world.
Well, welcome to About the Winelands. So Martin, I heard the clinking of glasses in the background when tell us a little before we even start.
Okay.
You have a secret there. It's 8 o'clock in the evening in Auckland. What are you drinking?
I've got stuck into a 1978 Zandvliet Shiraz, which most of the people listening to this wouldn't have been born when this wine was made. What's interesting about the wine is that I went to UCT, University of Cape Town, and as a student in 1980, I started buying 1978 vintage wines because I was told that they were worth keeping. And then in those days, there was this story that every second year, so every even year would be a really good vintage.
That seems to be some truth in that, because if you think back, I'm just thinking about Europe, right? And in France, they were saying 2002, which is an even year, and 2010 were good vintages. So it just shows you, there might be some truth in that, but all the way back to 1978. Wow.
And it's really good. Seriously, it's surprising.
Martin, this is not fair, right? You can't do this.
Okay, it's terrible.
You know, we've been in on a lockdown. We haven't had any wine, and now you're pulling out a bottle of 1978. So tell me, how did you get involved in the in the wine industry?
Okay, so obviously as a student at IKEAs, we used to go to Stellenbosch all the time on the wine route, just really to drink. But over time, I got to like wine as well and appreciate wine. But then I went back to Joburg and worked up there for a while. And then I wanted to go back to Cape Town, live in Cape Town. And a friend of mine, Jane Martin, who was working at the Cape Wine Academy, sent out my CV to a whole lot of companies. And the only company that actually answered my letter was Gilbey's in Stellenbosch.
Wow.
So I moved to Stellenbosch in 1983. Well, I moved to Cape Town in 1983 and then started working for Gilbey's in a marketing role in 1983. Oh, sorry, 87. I'm lying. Yeah, 1987. And those were the good years when there was still Stellenbosch Farmers Wineries. There was Distel or distillers, and then we were number 3. We were the small guys, but we were really flexible and really doing really well.
Those were also the years that the wine routes actually just started to get popular.
Yes, I think so. And we were mainly a spirits company, but we also had some interesting wineries that we either did bottling for or distribution for, like Nicky Kruiner of Kruiner, and then we had Chamonix, Labrie, Kleine Salza we used to own as well at that stage, and Hartenberg we owned as well.
Well, we used to. I was at Varsity at that time, and we used to get quite a bit of free drinks from Gilbey's all the time. So you must have been, especially around the Varsity time.
I would have been one of those, yeah.
So there you go. So and then you were at Gilbey's, and how did that culminate into you actually moving to New Zealand and then starting Planet Wine?
Sure. I left South Africa in 91 and I traveled around the world for about 2.5 years, sort of looking around where I could start my life again. And initially went to South America for about a year and then thought, no, well, I can't live there. And I ended up in Australia because I have family there. And I got a job fairly quickly in Australia with Penfolds, which became South Corp, in marketing roles again. So I was marketing manager for Lindemans, which is a really big brand, and Sepult and various other brands.
Okay.
And then after about 4 years, I said, nah, okay, I want to move on. And then I found a job with Corbin's Wines in New Zealand. In 1998, I moved to New Zealand. And yeah, I've been here 21 years and I haven't looked back.
Are you a rugby supporter?
Of course.
I hope you're not a New Zealand supporter because then the conversation's over.
I was actually at the Rugby World Cup last year. I was at the final as well, and I was wearing a green shirt.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was incredible.
What a World Cup, right? That was amazing.
It was superb.
So you started your own business when?
So I started Planet Wine in 2003, so about 18 years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
And the first wines I imported were actually Kaapzicht,
Okay.
and then also a winery out of Italy from Chianti Classico.
Okay, awesome. So you've been selling South African wines right from the beginning.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that was, that's what I knew a lot of, and there were so few South African wines in New Zealand at that stage.
Yeah. So was it an easy sell to get South African wines into New Zealand? I was wondering, how competitive South African wines could actually be in New Zealand.
Well, from a competitive point of view, especially now, let's talk about now. So what you've got at in the supermarkets, you've got Ubiqua sitting at maybe $6, and then Nederburg at times at about $10 or $12. So that's really cheap in New Zealand.
Mm-hmm.
So they're competing on a price point there, and it's not about South Africa there. It's about a price point and a wine that's okay at a price point. But at the higher level, South Africa can compete, but it has to be on quality. And that just takes time for people to, to be able to taste the wines. And really Planet Wine is the only importer and distributor that has a big portfolio of South African wines. There are a couple of other people who have maybe one brand. Like someone has De Morgenson, but they have no other brands. I don't think they've ever been to South Africa. So it's very difficult for them to tell the story with authenticity.
So from a producer point of view, right? I mean, a country like New Zealand is a rich country, so I suppose the wine market can be quite, even though there's not a huge population, the wine market can actually be quite big and quite lucrative. How do you actually, if you're a producer, what do you do to get your brand noticed in New Zealand? What would you be looking for from a producer?
Okay, so if I were a South African wine producer, and I suppose number one, you'd say, why would you attempt to get into New Zealand if you haven't already got into, all the other more lucrative markets, whether that's Europe, Holland, Germany, England, US, et cetera, and maybe Hong Kong, Singapore as well. But if you do decide to get into New Zealand, because it is a good wine market, two things. Number one is find a good distributor, someone who's going to do the work for you, not just sell your wine, but actually tell your story and do the work. And then number two is visit. You've got to visit. And because people buy into people, there's a lot of wine around, there are a lot of wineries around. But if you come and people hear your accent, you're different, they get to know you, and you come every 2 or 3 years, after a while, you build a loyal following. And it's really simple, but you've got to do the work. So before COVID, actually both Brouwer Raats and Chris Molyneux were going to come over this year.
Wow.
But sadly those plans have been scuppered, but hopefully next year.
So do you arrange almost like a mini roadshow for these guys when they come over?
Yeah, definitely. Yes. So I import from 15 different countries around the world. I import a huge number of different brands, a lot of South African brands, but I sell all over New Zealand, mainly to good restaurants and good wine shops. So when someone comes here for, let's say, 5 days or 7 days, I would arrange dinners with consumers and restaurateurs, and then trade visits as well, where we get all the trade together to come to one place where we can show all the wines, and and the winemaker can tell their story.
I think that was my next question, from a producer side, if the guy's sitting there and thinking, okay, well, this guy can help me get into New Zealand. How are you going to pick the guy that you're going to work with? And what do you want to see the producer commit to? And how does he get into your shop?
Well, so I don't, Planet Wine doesn't have a shop. So I do have a wine shop, but it's called something else. It's Kahn and Finley. So it's a
Okay.
separate business. But let's not talk about a shop. How does someone get into my portfolio?
Mm-hmm.
It's because I have so many South African brands in the portfolio already. There has to be a gap. There has to be a niche that they can fit in, either by region or by the style of wine they produce. Not so much about price point, because I tend to focus more on premium products. So I generally, I have a, if you like, I have a pyramid. Call it a pinotage pyramid, with cheaper wines at the bottom and more expensive wines at the top. And then on the other axis, I would have the style. So the big old traditional style of pinotage, or the Liberté, that type of thing, or Kunz wines on the right-hand side, the really lighter, more the Pinot Noir style. So in that whole matrix, if there's a big gap somewhere, I'd say, I actually need a pinotage that sits, let's say, retail between $18 and $25. And what style do I need? And then I would look around, I would look around for a winery. And the same with Chenin Blanc, because those are really the two, if you like, South African
Mm,
grape varieties.
that's right. I think Shannon is making, yeah, is one of the varieties that can actually make an impact into the future.
True.
Um,
And very little Chenin planted in South Africa. So people are, if anything, then there's Chenin from the Loire, and then
mhm.
it's South African Chenin, and people getting to know the South African Chenin, and it has such a diverse range as well, from really minerally all the way through to quite fruity.
You're also selling spirits and liqueurs, but I noticed that I didn't see that any brands from South Africa is on that
Yeah,
list.
yeah. The only what I do bring in is a bit of brandy, but from Kaapstad. But that's only because they are, one of the wineries I deal with anyway. The challenge with South Africa, sorry, with New Zealand, is that brandy is very small, and South Africa brandy is very big. So, KWV is here in the market. Someone else is importing KWV, so I will have that in my shop. But and there's Richelieu and Klipdrift and a couple of those. But brandy's not big here. I have spoken to gin distilleries like Inverroche and Blind Tiger. So at some stage, I'd like to do that. But the challenge in New Zealand is that we do not have bonded warehousing
Oh my word!
for,
No.
for imported product. So our excise duty would be around, like, for a 750 ml bottle at 43% alcohol, our excise duty just on one bottle would be about $17.
Wow.
So if you think of, let's say I'm buying something at $10, and you add freight and everything else, and by the time you add the importer margin and then the wholesaler margin, it gets to be really expensive. But also, if you're bringing in a pallet of spirits, I have to basically pay up front the sales tax and the excise duty. So it's a
Mm.
big investment. And then it takes time, to sell the product as well. So for the time being, no, but in the future, I will. I also had a chat to Larry Berger. Do you know him?
No, actually, I don't.
He has the rooibos tea liqueur.
Oh yes, yes, I've heard about
Yeah,
this.
yeah. So I had a good meeting with him as well. And again, sometimes the pricing. Yeah, South Africans are very surprised when they see the pricing of South African wine in New Zealand, because my God, that's incredibly high. But also, South African wineries aren't stupid. The prices that they sell their wines at in South Africa is a lot lower
Mm.
than their export prices,
Yes.
you know, and that's just good commercial sense.
Yeah, I mean, you have to adapt yourself to the market you're in, right? I mean, I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
also, is that the reason why in some markets they actually rebrand the wines as well to actually have different brands and stuff?
Ooh, I don't know where that happens, but what does happen sometimes is that for different channels, like for the on-premise, like for restaurants, whatever, they may have the same wine, but with, that goes into retail, but they'll have a different label that'll go into restaurants, so people can't compare.
Yeah, I've seen that happening in the US and in Ireland, where people actually do, they actually label the wine specifically for the market.
Yeah.
But so your own sales, do you only sell in New Zealand, or do you actually sell regional in Australia as well? I'm just thinking about this excise duty problem.
Well, every now and then, because there's not much South African wine in Australia, so every now and then I do have people contacting me when they're searching for certain wines, and every now and then I do send over maybe a 6-pack or 12 bottles of wine to somewhere. I'm actually just in the process of sending 30 bottles of wine to Hong Kong.
Okay.
to a guy who's just discovered South African white blends from the Swartland. So he's incredibly excited. So he doesn't really care. He just wants the wine.
Oh, that's interesting.
So I'm sending him some Tafutpat from Evan Sadi, then some of Adi Badenhorst wines, and then some of the Malinu as well, white blend.
Oh, very interesting. So, Martin, you must have had quite a experience also with the coronavirus, and this has forced everyone to rethink their business models. Do you have any changes or new ideas in mind?
Most probably something that was happening anyway, which is the whole online buying thing. So from two sides, one is the consumer is much more happy now, much more trusting now to buy online. And then the other one is that every company that actually, well, number one, you have to have a website and you have to have systems in place to supply your customer quickly and in a good way, and that also their interface, the website interface is really easy to use. But that's something that's been happening anyway. All I think is coronavirus has accelerated that process.
I think that's a worldwide trend. I mean, direct consumer has been a trend in all retail, not only in wine, because the internet takes out the middleman. And I was wondering if that whole, like you say, currently your South African wine producer would not really talk to his end customer in any shape or form. He would rather see the distributor as his end customer. I'm talking the actual drinker, the guy that actually consumes the wine in the end, the consumer. And how do, is there space for brand building, for instance, where guys actually go on a campaign to actually talk to the consumers that actually drink their product?
I think that's quite a small segment of the market. Yeah, the people who are that interested in wine that they really want to speak to or listen to the winemaker. I mean, those people are there, but you've got to ask the question whether it's really worthwhile doing in terms of the effort involved and the time.
I'm talking more about communication from the brand, not necessarily about a quality or the winemaker or technical knowledge.
That's important, really important, especially what I've found now that I've got a wine shop as well. I've found that Facebook is quite good for telling stories and for people to have a bit of time, but Instagram is really the one where it really drives people to action. So Instagram is really good. And the other thing that I've been discussing with Chris Molyneux is that once we're out of lockdown again, we have a bit more space and we can have events, that we will actually do a Zoom tasting with his wines, where he'll be on Zoom in South Africa, let's say in the morning, and we'll be sitting there with 10, 20 people with his wines, and he can talk us through his wines. We did one of those already about 6 or 8 weeks ago with Craig Hawkins from Testalonga.
Okay.
So we did one of those Zoom tastings with him.
I think those things are getting more important, because if you think back, right, if just thinking about marketing, I mean, the guys in Champagne, the French guys, have been so good in telling their stories, right? Everybody knows some other story about a widow selling champagne or saving the winery or whatever. And I think that's something that our guys can learn from, is that storytelling of the brand is extremely important.
Yeah. No, the thing is with Champagne, they're big machines. They have big marketing budgets, and they have a big team of people who can do that. With, you know, with, I'd say, with most South African and New Zealand wineries, they are so small that they don't really have the resources to do everything. So they're winemakers, they're viticulturists, they're the marketing people, they are the accountant, and there's maybe 3 or 4 people doing everything, you know.
But
It's hard. It's really hard.
isn't social media a bit of a leveler in this case, because it's a much less expensive way to get to people to notice you than it is to run a old traditional media campaign.
Yes, I agree. I agree. And it's quite easy to do.
Yeah.
I mean, it requires a little bit of take a photograph and come up with a line, and there you go. But you've got to do it regularly and consistently.
So I'm just thinking, in South Africa, we're coming up to the 1st of September, which is also Cap Classic Day, the MCC, the local bubbly. Um, how is that something that sells where you are? Is it something that people are trying to sell?
I import the Haute Cabrières or the Pierre Jourdain wines.
Mm-hmm.
It's a tough call. What you've got is, obviously, you've got champagne,
Mm-hmm.
then you've got Prosecco, which is massive. Then
Yeah.
New Zealand produced, because of the cooler climate, New Zealand produces really, really good sparkling wine as well. Then you've got Cava, and then you're trying to create another category and a presence for, you know, South African sparkling. The wines are really good, but it's a tough job.
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's quite interesting. So, Martin, I mean, you've had quite an interesting wine journey. So, what is the most important thing that you've learned in this journey?
For me, there are no shortcuts. Do your research. So what I do is I go to the wineries, I meet the people, I kick the soil, I see the vineyards, and I look the people in the eye, shake their hand. And it's really important for me is building the relationships and knowing that in 5 or 10 years' time, I still want to go and spend time with that person and talk about wine, but not only wine. You know, wine for me is it's really the juice or the glue that holds my life together. So it's about cultures, it's about people, it's about language, it's about food, it's about stories, and that's the important part for me. For me, is travel and meet the people. At times I've just imported something some time ago without meeting people. They've sent me samples and I've just gone for it, and it just hasn't worked generally.
Mm. Well, like you said right in the beginning, business is about people, right?
Yeah, and it's patience, you know, patience, and yeah, and understand the terroir, understand what, you know, what the people are doing and what the philosophy is as well. And it's important that, you know, I understand that philosophy and that I can either live with it or I actually agree with it as well.
Well, now that we're talking about philosophy, we need to get personal. I really have to ask you a very, very personal question, and that is, how is that Shiraz tasting?
I tell you what, I'm amazed how, I shouldn't say this because it's going to get people green around the gills, but
Mm-hmm.
this is still, I thought it would actually, because we've been talking for a while, and I thought it would have actually fallen over a little bit, but it's amazing. I wish I could send you a little doppy.
I wish I mean, yeah, I wish we could, once technology can do that, then
Yeah, true,
that's
true,
for
true.
sure.
I
But,
tell you what,
mhm.
the color is amazing. It's deep and dark.
I can believe that. Yeah. So
Wow.
definitely send me a few pictures over, and even if you want to
Yeah.
shoot, even if you want to shoot a short video, we'll definitely put it on your group. So, Martin, to end off with, I ask
Yeah.
everybody to give us their favorite or their own wine quote. What is yours?
I was looking at that, and I didn't want to use anybody else's. Yeah, there's so many good wine quotes around, but I think I've already mentioned it early on. Is that, you know, wine is the juice that holds my life together, that oils my wheels and gears. You know, that's sort of a quote that's sort of, if you picture it and the big machine and or maybe the bones and everything else and all the joints and everything, and that you can just see the wine, the red wine. When I think of this juice, I'm thinking of red wine, and it's just running through and it gets pumped back up again and runs through again. So I just think we're part of one big family of wine people. And, wine allows me to travel, make friends, learn, and all the while eat and drink merrily. And that's it. What more could I want?
Well, that's amazing. It's such a blessing if you can actually do what you love and what you're passionate about. So
Yep.
so that's great.
So true. Yeah.
Martin, if people want to get hold of you, how did they get hold of you?
So most probably the easiest would be just by email.
Mm-hmm.
So just anything you want to say in front of @planetwine.co.nz. It's like a catch-all. If you want to say Blixum or Fussbait or whatever you want to do @planetwine.co.nz. That's most probably the easiest.
Mm-hmm.
Or otherwise, just jump on the website. So planetwine.co.nz. And that's it. And both Facebook and Instagram are just NZ Planet Wine.
Okay, well, we'll put all the links in the description. Martin,
Cool.
it's been a pleasure talking to you. You've really, it was quite interesting. You've made me jealous with your wine, that's for sure. Have a great evening, and thanks for spending the time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Well, very, very lucky to chat and be able to. You made me think a little bit about as well, and it's great to have those questions beforehand to prepare a little bit. But SA is an amazing country, amazing people, friendly people, and I just hope next year we'll look back and say yes, thank God that's over, and then have a great glass of wine.
I think things changed. I was stuck with the ash cloud for 6 weeks, couldn't fly, and we thought we were never going to fly again, right? And then 6 weeks later, it was over. I think, things will go back to normal eventually.
They will, yes. And we'll all be different.
Thanks, Martin. Ciao, ciao.
Thank you. Well, all the best, team. Thank you.
Thank you for supporting our show. If you would like to get more exposure for your business, please have a look at our sponsorship options. Thanks again for supporting About the Winelands. Please follow us on YouTube and on our social media channels. All details and links are in the description.